Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us. The title of tonight's video is How I Cook My Steak. And I was very careful not to say how to cook a steak, because for many people, how you cook your steak is a spiritual experience. And I can't say that that's not true for me. People have their ways of cooking a steak. And I'm not going to argue with any of them. If it's how you like it, then it's right. But I'm going to show you how I like it. But first, if you like our videos, you could give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you click the little bell icon at the top right, you'll get a notice when I post new videos. Now let's get cooking. Now, a rib is my steak of choice, and this is a big one, but I do always get 2 meals off of it. So I don't think it's too much of an extravagance, even though I have to say buying steak is like buying gold. It's gotten very expensive. But the first thing I do is dry it off. Make sure any juice that's on it, any meat juice, blood, whatever you want to call it, is gone. And I've explained the Maillard reaction before. That's Mailliard. And it has to do with making meat brown for maximum flavor. So that's why you dry it. And then I make a rub. And the ingredients for the rub can vary. You can use other things for spices, but you always use salt. And for one steak, I use 1 teaspoonful of kosher salt. You can use more, don't use less. And then I'm going to use a 1/2 teaspoonful of garlic powder, and then I'm going to use a 1/4 teaspoonful of paprika, which is totally optional. Not many people use paprika, but it brings a little smoky flavor and it brings a beautiful color. So I use a lot of paprika. You could add some onion powder if you like, or you could add, some dried chives, whatever you like. I don't put any sauce on a steak once it's cooked. And so the flavor that goes into the steak, besides the natural flavor of really good meat, is in this little bowl here. It's the salt and the garlic. And that's enough. I said earlier, people have cooking steak as a spiritual experience. I think almost everybody who really loves steak has a philosophy about how to cook a steak. And mine is KISS. Keep it simple, sweetheart. Don't do too much to it. Let the flavor of the steak shine through. Don't cover it up. Don't put too much on it. This is a little salt, a little garlic, a little paprika. You can add some pepper if you like. A lot of people do add pepper. I don't. And you just rub it in. So basically what we're doing here on the steak is a dry rub. And I just held this up and you could see that little membrane there, and I actually should have pulled that off. I didn't. Just didn't think about it, but I normally pull that little membrane off. Just peel it off with a knife, because it can make your steak curl a little bit, and then you have a little tough edge on it that's a little hard to cut through. You don't have to. I just normally do. And then I'm going to put this back in the tray it came in a 1-gallon plastic bag, open, not closed, and put it in the fridge for anywhere from an hour to overnight. So take it out of the fridge about 20 minutes before you're ready to cook it. And I'm going to clarify a little butter here. I'm going to sort of clarify it. So there's some argument and some debate about whether or not you take it out of the refrigerator before you cook it, because you don't want to leave it out more than about 20 minutes, and that won't bring it to room temperature. And people argue over whether or not then you should do it at all. And in restaurants, they generally don't, because, well, you just don't leave food laying out in a restaurant. The health department will get you. But you can watch it here. You can do it for about 20 minutes. And the purpose really is not so much to bring it to room temperature, is to let the dry out. Because the drier you get the surface, the more quickly you're going to get browning on the outside, and the more evenly it's going to brown, and therefore the more tender and juicy it's going to be inside. So you can see I just melted about a half stick of butter here, and I'm skimming off the solids that separated out. I'm not going to do this totally. I'm just going to pour the clarified part into my pan. Now my choice of pan, I may get a little bit of the solids in there. Just don't get much. The choice of pan is important. You want a pan where your steak will lay flat so that all parts of it make contact, all parts of the steak make contact with the pan, because you want to seal the steak. And so I use this. So I turn the heat on about medium high, and you see I dripped some water on there and it skitters. So the pan is hot enough. Don't go nuts. Don't turn it as high as it'll go, depending on your stove. But when it's hot enough, when the water will skitter across the top, put your steak in. Presentation side down, if that matters to you. And then leave it alone. Don't touch it. Setting my timer for 3.5 minutes. On a steak this thick, 3.5 minutes ought to give me medium rare. I may cook it just a little bit more than that, but it'll still be pink when it's done. And after 3.5 minutes, when my timer went off, I'm going to carefully loosen it, and then I'm going to flip it over. And I don't stick a fork in it. That's just me. You might use a fork, but I don't like to poke a hole in it. And there you go. That's your first side. Now, I always cook my steak in cast iron. I always cook it in this cast iron skillet, which is a griddle, because you can control the heat. I don't grill outside, by the way. You can control the heat by moving your pan around. So when you first flip it, like within the first 30 seconds, I put a couple more pieces of butter. This is not going to stay in the pan long enough to start smoking and burn. That was the reason I clarified the butter. Now on this steak, this little end here is sticking up a little bit, and it's a little thicker than the rest of the steak. That's just how it was cut. I'm not pressing this hard. I'm just barely holding it down because I want it to make contact with the hot pan. And this piece over here where I did not strip off that little membrane, it wants to curl a little bit too. And you can see I move my pan around to get the maximum heat on the spot that's thicker. And I might move my pan around several times while I'm doing this. Despite what people say, cast iron does not transfer heat evenly. It transfers heat pretty well. But one of the things about cooking in cast iron is be ready to move the pan. Unless, you have a stove that has a flame this big, you're going to have hot spots and you're going to have cooler spots. So I'm just barely pressing this down, not pressing the juice out of it, barely pressing it down to make it make contact. Now I'm going to cook this 3.5 minutes on this side too. And I'll tell you something now that I knew but didn't pay attention to because I was video taping, is you need to serve it right away. When you take it out of the pan, you serve it thin because it continues to cook. It's pretty well sealed. You've sealed the juice and the heat in by browning it. And it took me about a minute to get this on the plate, get it set up for the camera, so it continued to cook past what I normally cook it. I usually like it real pink. This is a little pink. I don't like it raw, and I don't like it charred. Now, I'm not going to cut into this to check it because I don't like to cut it, and because I know that it's cooked enough. Once you've done this for a while, I've seen really good chefs that can tell you how done it is by touching it. I've taken this up. I'm going to put a little salad on here and my low-carb tater tots, and then we're going to eat. And I guess you know that that was the royal we, because I know you're not here and you're not going to have any of this. But hopefully you're going to cook one for yourself. You know, at least once a month, and I did it 2 times this month, I budget out my money so that I can afford a steak. I eat low carb. I like to find the things that have the most flavor. See, there's that little membrane. The steak is tender as butter. That little membrane has to be cut through. And yes, next time I'll remember to take it off. So there you go. Now, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Please excuse my table manners. I'm sorry. It just kind of overwhelmed me. It's hard for you to see because the lighting here is never good, but this really is pink in the middle. Not quite as pink as I wanted it, but it's pink. I hope you try this way of cooking your steak if you're not 100% happy with the way you cook it now. This is always good. It never fails me. I generally get the steak the day ahead and put it in the fridge overnight with the salt, the dry rub, and it never lets me down. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us and hope to see you again tomorrow.